So, how many of you, how many are visiting Pennington for the first time today? Wow. Okay, great. So I wear a lot of different hats here. That's one of the reasons I'm bald. And the idea is I want to welcome you. So we very much cherish the relationship we have with the community, and we hope that you get something out of this as well as your time here today. I'm going to talk a little bit about Alzheimer's disease, and specifically why is it in Louisiana that we have the third highest rates of Alzheimer's deaths in the country. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about what it is we do here, and then I'm going to open the floor up to questions, because that's how I'm going to get a number 5 on that second one there. So whether it was useful to you. So I want to make sure I get lots of 5s. So, and I'm also going to try to anticipate a few questions. I do a lot of church basements around the state, and so I can anticipate some of these questions, I think. So without further ado, what is dementia? Well, it's a decline in cognitive status from a previous state. And so we can have lots of different, that can encompass a lot of things. It can be a mild change, it can be a severe change, it can be something that we can handle, it can be something that impacts your ability to interact socially, it can affect work. It can also be a variety of, have multiple other characteristics, things like reversible or irreversible, okay? I'm just giving you some of these because this is kind of what we go through whenever we're trying to figure out if someone has Alzheimer's disease or other types of dementia. So it can affect multiple aspects of cognition. If nothing else today, I hope you leave here knowing that, or thinking about your brain's performance a little bit differently. So, for example, your ability to sit here and get anything at all about what I'm trying to say, a lot of things are going on. One is your attention. So if you don't have a basic level of attention, everything else can be in place and it doesn't matter. It's just not going to be received. Second thing is you got to be, you have to be able to take and make it useful to you. So your ability to acquire that language and process it in a way. In a moment, your ability to speak and to get your questions answered, that's a different aspect of your cognitive performance. It's related, but it's not the same. The third thing is this executive function. Your ability to then act upon what you hear today and to make choices and that sort of thing. There's a lot going on in very, very basic sorts of things. And dementia can affect one or all aspects of cognition. And we'll talk about that. It can be associated with other neurological abnormalities, or it can occur in the absence of those things. So you can have a memory problem and also have a problem with your gait or reflexes, or have seizure activity. And these things all dictate whether or not you do or do not have Alzheimer's type dementia. It can be brought on by a specific event or medical condition. In other words, you can have a trauma. You can have a thyroid issue, a hormonal issue. You can have a variety of things that could cause the development of dementia that could or could not be related to Alzheimer. And it could progress slowly or could progress rapidly. And so when we talk about Alzheimer's disease, we're talking about we're trying to characterize a specific disease, okay? We're not talking about vascular dementia, frontal temporal dementia, dementia with Lewy bodies, normal pressure hydrocephalus. There's a whole host of things that can cause dementia in individuals that are not Alzheimer's disease. But whenever we're talking about Alzheimer's, we're talking about something that still currently is irreversible. It affects it's primarily observed as a memory complaint. And this memory complaint is significant to affect both work and social life. It is documented to be significantly progressive over the course of at least 6 months. It occurs in the absence of other neurological abnormalities. So in the absence of stroke, in the absence of abnormalities with balance, seizure activity, all of these things. I'll get to that in a moment. And it's not dictated to have occurred by a specific event. You know, you don't develop Alzheimer's disease on a Saturday. Maybe on a Sunday you do, but on a Saturday. So the idea is that it's not brought on by a specific event. It can't be explained by changes in thyroid and other types of things that we know can be linked to the development of dementia, and is generally a slow progressive disease. That being said, the one thing that you can the one thing about Alzheimer's disease that's for sure, the thing that's the same for everybody, is that it's different in everyone who has it. And so you may say, like, well, how could that be? What are some of these differences? Well, let's just start with response to medication. So currently there are 3 medications available that work in about 25 to 30% of the people that have the disease. In those people, they get some benefit for 9 to 12 months. Dr. Keller did not say these drugs are worthless. Dr. Keller did not say you shouldn't take these drugs. I'm saying that it's really pitiful that that's all that we have in our arsenal right now. But that's starting to change, and I'll get to that. So whether or not someone responds favorably to medications, a big variable. Wandering and sundowning. So the percentage of people with Alzheimer's who wander is 50 to 60%. We don't understand why that is. Why don't they all wander? Don't understand it. Sundowning, this whole thing about people becoming more agitated, confused, and later on in the day, occurs 50 to 60%. We don't understand why that happens. Why some people are more susceptible than others. The pathology we'll get to. Suffice to say, it's different in people. The amount of pathology and the presence of other pathologies. The progression of the disease. So one big one to point out now is that, always keep in mind when we're talking about Alzheimer's disease is people even with moderate stages of the disease have good days and bad days. And so that's not to say that they go back to being when they were 40, but they have days where they are much more high functioning than other days. And we don't understand that either. But that's telling us something about the disease, that it's not a static thing. There's a lot going on in why someone's brain is performing the way that it is, and it's probably not dictated by pathology alone. Again, multiple pathologies present and not a static disease. It's not. You should not think about Alzheimer's disease as being a. Don't want to say that you can necessarily go back. You can't go back to when someone's 40, but we have a lot of hope that we're going to be able to decrease a lot of these adverse events, this wandering and sundowning, and improve the quality of life for people, and increase the number of good days for people. But we also think that we're starting to look at the disease different, in that it's not a terminal game that we're playing with here. We thought we knew what caused Alzheimer's disease, and this is what you always see, these plaques and tangles. And so I can go into as much detail as people want after the talk, but I know from giving hundreds of these that this is where people go to sleep. So there are bad things that happen outside the cell called plaques. There are bad things that happen inside the cells called tangles. And the bottom line is that up until about 3 years ago, all developments of new therapies were based on trying to prevent plaques and tangles. We now know that plaques and tangles, while important to the disease, are not the cause of the disease, and do not appear to be things that affect the trajectory of the disease. And we can give 100 examples of why that's so, but I'll just give you a couple. I came from the Alzheimer's Center in Lexington, Kentucky, and pathology was my primary area of focus. We're starting a brain bank here in Louisiana. It's like pulling teeth here to get this thing started. My gosh. But anyway, we're very close to having that up and going. And the idea is that, in Kentucky, we followed people for decades. We knew everything about the way that their brain was performing. Whenever they died, we thought we knew what we would see. And whenever you look in their brain, you have people who die as controls, people who did not have dementia, who had the levels of pathology, Alzheimer's pathology specifically, that you would say this person has Alzheimer's disease. However, they were cognitively intact. And people used to say, well, they just didn't live long enough. And my mentor and others in the field, that they're so pathology driven that they were able to get away with that forever. And people like myself would be able to say, we'd say, Bill, he was 90 years old. How old did he have to be? But and then also plaques and tangles have no correlation with disease progression, and a whole host of other things. We're starting to move away from that. Now here's the point. The point is that we follow people in Kentucky. We're starting it here, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And we do this so that we can understand what influences whether or not someone has successful brain aging or develops dementia, and then why someone has more adverse events than another person once they develop the disease. And we also are looking for cures to the disease. And the bottom line is that when you go to a physician, they're going to go through a variety of criteria, some more stringent, some less stringent. But the idea is they go through this list that I was showing you earlier of things to come up with possible or probable AD. And so possible means that you meet many but not all of the criteria that could be consistent with the development of Alzheimer's disease. So for example, maybe you're someone who, while you've had a slow progression of the disease over the course of 6 months that's interfered with work and social life, you at that same time, just prior to that period, had a major fall. Okay, and so all the complications that come after a fall could be involved in that. Let's wait a little bit longer. So you're going to get a possible. Okay, possible done. Probable means there's no other explanation that can come about that they can see, so they're going to give you a probable. Definitive requires that you die with probable AD, and then when we do the pathological workup, you have plaques and tangles in the areas that you would expect, and you don't have other pathologies. Now here's the problem. The problem is that very, very, very few people die with so the physicians back in Kentucky who are extremely stringent on coming up with that initial diagnosis are right about 90% of the time. Some physicians it would be much worse. But let's just take the people in Kentucky and you say 90% of them, they make mistakes on about 10%. The problem is in that 90%, almost all of them have other pathologies. So they have vascular abnormalities in the brain. Okay? They have the development of frontal atrophy in the brain. They have a whole host of things that are Lewy bodies present in the brain. And so pure Alzheimer's disease does exist, but it is extremely rare. Okay? So why is it? So that's just word games for some little bald guy from Kentucky, right? No, it's actually very important. So what that means is that it's likely why we see this variability that we're talking about is probably due to the fact that Alzheimer's disease is not one thing. Alzheimer's disease is going to be multiple types of syndromes, and people are going to have Alzheimer's syndrome type 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I don't know what the final number will be, but the idea will be you fit this diagnosis for probable AD, and you're, for example, an ApoE4 carrier. So apolipoprotein E, all of us in this room have it. There are 3 flavors, 2, 3, or 4. It just causes subtle changes in the composition of the protein. And if you're a 2 or 3, it's a very good thing. So you actually have a decreased likelihood for the development of dementia as well as stroke, atherosclerosis, a whole host of things. If you're unfortunate enough to have an ApoE4, like me, that you're at increased risk. Okay? But the idea is that I'm also at increased risk for a whole host of other things. So the cardiovascular disease, atherosclerosis, etc. And so whether or not someone has hypertension is a major dictator of the type of dementia that they'll have. And so if nothing else, leave here today knowing that it's a good thing. If Alzheimer's wasn't on the billboard, nobody would walk in this room. So we're going to keep using the word Alzheimer's disease. But Alzheimer's disease is going to move to an Alzheimer's syndrome, and it's really going to help with developing good treatments and such. The example that I use is cancer. So in the 1950s, cancer research, they treated cancer like it didn't matter whether you had liver cancer, prostate cancer, breast cancer. Cancer was cancer. Let's study them all as if they're the same. Very commonly, you would use cells from hepatocarcinoma to study what causes breast cancer. We all know that's stupid and all now. You know, look at survival rates now and treatments now. Much better. It's because we recognize there are fundamental differences in the different types of cancer. And it's going to be the same thing with Alzheimer's disease. So we're going to do a better job at breaking people down as to which category they have. And instead of giving a clinical trial where we look at people who meet this thing for moderate Alzheimer's disease, we're going to focus more on, do you have Alzheimer's disease and are you an ApoE4 carrier? Do you also have hypertension? Are you also a diabetic? Et cetera, et cetera. So that's where it's going. So it's a good thing. It's a good thing. So what does cause Alzheimer's disease? Well, the biggest risk factor is age. So, and you know, the thing is, we're living longer in most places. A lot of people don't realize it's not all across the United States, and I'm going to show you that on the next slide. But what we're dying from has changed, and all of these things play a really important role on why people are developing Alzheimer's disease. So you always see this figure, things like this, where people live longer. Life expectancy now is almost, for the children born today, is almost 80 years old. So and women live longer than men. Throw out all your reasons why that is, but women live longer. But that's not all across the United States. So here's a, you want to be in the brown. So brown means that you have a longer life expectancy. So people in eastern Washington live longer. And you can see through here that this is bad. So in Louisiana, it's less than 76.5. This is outdated. This slide's from 3 years ago. So, but it's going this way, not this way. So I moved from the state where we had the absolute lowest in the country with life expectancy, and I moved to the place with the second to worst. So we're still in a real. It's great for research. We're in a very sick population. The reasons why people die has completely changed. It used to be because of infectious disease was the primary cause of death, and due to vaccines and better sanitation, chlorination of water, all of that thing. The reasons for infectious disease killing people, the incidence is dramatically decreased. The rise in here in the 1980s, this is HIV driven, but people no longer die of. People do die of infectious disease, but it's not the primary cause of death anymore. And so what we have noticed is this other change. So things like obesity. So you can see a really nice overlay with the graph I was showing earlier. And the thing you got to realize is 66% of Americans are overweight or obese. This is directly proportional to the development of metabolic disease. So 1 in 3 are predicted to be diabetic aged in 2050. I was meeting on Thursday with individuals from, if someone could go back and get the AV people, because it looks like the TV's going to turn off. So the guy who's, yeah, he's busy texting. So. So the idea is, you know, 40 years ago there were none to almost none, no children with type 2 diabetes. It was just completely unheard of. So now you have 11 to 12% of children with type 2 diabetes, and in China it's just starting to happen. And so they were over here. They're starting some programs and things. They're actually going to have a better chance at preventing a lot of that than we do in America. But so we're dying from complications of obesity, cardiovascular disease, many cancers, and all of these things are also. You need to leave here knowing that the brain is not functioning, and the brain is not. The health of the brain is not regulated by what happens in the skull. It's regulated by what goes on throughout the body. So, and you know, Louisiana has the 3rd highest rates of deaths due to Alzheimer's disease in the country, and so you can see that here. And really, there's a real rich increase or overrepresentation of Alzheimer's disease deaths in the southern states. And you know, a lot of this is going to be due to related to metabolic factors, including obesity, and we'll get into that. So what can you do about it? Well, I'm going to give you a 4-minute spiel here on what it is that we do, and then I'm going to open the floor up to questions so that I can get a number 5 on the little sheet. Moved here in 2008. We started a study based on what we had at the University of Kentucky. Here we call it the Louisiana Aging Brain Study, so LaBrains. Anybody in the study here? Anybody here in the study? 2, 3 people? Okay. We have 1,400 participants around the state. It's the 12th largest in the country right now. It took a lot of basement meetings to make this happen. But the idea is we're statewide. We have a 93% retention year to year of our participants. They like it. They keep coming back. We're starting year 3 now. I'll talk about that. One of the things that we're starting to learn is that it's very troubling. But so if we look year to year, our participants come back. 87% of them remain stable, meaning that they haven't had a significant change. 11% had a significant change on one or more tests, still within the normal range, but decline. And 2% of our participants developed active dementia. So it doesn't mean they developed Alzheimer's disease. It could be vascular dementia, etc. But the reason this is so troubling is, so my friends who run similar types of studies around the country, although we're the 12th largest now. So, but what we're noticing is that this number should be 5%. So what happens is that the incidence, the decline is happening in more people than it should. Those people that have decline are declining faster than they should. So we fully anticipate that our study will show that in Louisiana there is a higher percentage of individuals with significant cognitive decline and that are at much higher risk for development of dementia. Okay? So that number is only going to go up here in Louisiana based on our studies. So what is it that we do? We have about 1,100 people here in Baton Rouge in our LaBrain study. We have one full-time office in Shreveport. We're going to open new offices in Alexandria and Lafayette. I've got about 300 people on waiting list at each of these cities. And the idea is that we'll have about 3,500 participants. As those people move to developing dementia, they go into our next set of studies, this ADS, Alzheimer's disease studies. But we actively recruit into our Alzheimer's disease studies. We have things that we're looking at, awesome. We're looking at what causes, so one of the problems that we have with Alzheimer's disease is that as you develop it, we rely more on informants. So there's objective data and there's subjective data. So subjective means I ask you about someone else. Objective, I'm measuring it from that person. And so our ability to collect that kind of objective data is very poor right now in Alzheimer's, and we're developing better tests for that to allow us to be able to quantify better. One, so that you can really monitor disease progression, which is important, and two, so you have better readouts for these clinical trials to really know objectively if they're having benefit. The third thing that we're doing is looking at factors that could influence. Thanks, man. Looking at things that influence those things that I was talking about earlier: sundowning, wandering, etc. And then the idea is that we're bringing in clinical trials currently. If people want to participate in a clinical trial for Alzheimer's disease, they go to Houston or Birmingham. I'm not supposed to say too much about it, but suffice it to say that we have trials coming. So the reason that happens is because, one, Pennington invests in the infrastructure and lets this little bald guy go run all over the state. Second reason is because we have community participation. So it truly is one of those things where the community participating allows us to do something beneficial for them. So if you want access to those trials, we need to keep having people come. And what else did I want to say about that? Oh, the other thing is that things are added new every year. So, and there'll be ancillary studies. So what that means is that if people want to come in and they just want to get their cognitive measures done so they can get that free early detection, so why do people participate? They get free early detection. So if we have a baseline measure on you, if you want to think about it this way, there's a wide range in normal, a very wide range. And so we have tests now, the test that we use to measure whether or not someone's had a decline in cognitive status. It's very good at picking up between people with moderate stage disease and people that are controls, age-matched controls. They're horrible at the early stuff. That gray area, which is actually the most important one there, is just absolutely horrible because there's a wide overlap between what would be considered normal and the earliest change. And it's no different than going to the physician's office and getting your mammogram, your prostate exam. If you're at risk for heart disease, they give you the stress test. You get all these baseline measures so that we can detect a change, right? So that's the whole key, detect what's different. It's much more powerful. So the idea is that it's not going to be long before everybody gets a cognitive baseline at 60 and over. And this is a way to get it done for free. But the other thing is that we look at how things like, for example, nutrition. So the choices in foods, how they relate to whether or not someone remains in that stable, declining, or demented bins, if you will. Fitness and balance, things about gait, the number of steps people take, how much they sit. All these things are going to have a role. Body composition, the amount of adiposity, adipose tissue and where it is in the body plays a significant role. Sleep, so we monitor sleep and stress, depression. Depression is that's a horrible one. So depression is one of those things that, not only, one, it's significant. We need to have reactive depression. Somebody dies, you've had a traumatic event. Reactive depression is something that you need to work through. It's a very healthy, normal type of thing. But chronic depression is something that is significant enough to cause dementia. But what's worse about it is that it accelerates, for example, with Alzheimer's disease. It greatly accelerates the progression of the disease in people that have it. And so there's this, it's really cool to study. Like for example, we still don't understand why if you take people and I put them in a room and they don't even talk to the individuals, but they're in a room where people are having conversation, okay? Those people are at much lower risk to development of depression, and they get a whole host of other beneficial things from it without even participating, okay? We're all social animals. Your coming here today is a very positive step towards your mental health. And we don't understand that at all. I mean, we don't have a clue why that is, but it's very powerful. It's one of the most powerful things. And so part of what we're trying to do is to understand that, but it is a... And one of the bad things about Alzheimer's disease is, of course, it makes people become more withdrawn. And so we know that touching, and that's another whole thing, just touching people also makes a huge difference on depression, quality of life, everything else. And we have no idea. We have no idea why that is. So, but we're teasing a lot of that apart. That's not to say that if you join our study, we're going to hook you up to a monitor and see how well you sleep. We have all different degrees. We can become as invasive as people want or not. And the other things that, but a lot of people like it. Like for example, like with the walking. So we can have people come in and we put an accelerometer on. We can put a pedometer on you and count the number of steps you take and link that to your thing. But what happens is we can also do things like, for example, we can put an accelerometer on you that picks up all bodily movements, not just your walking, but all bodily movements. And we can put another type on you that dictates how much you sit and how much you sleep. Okay? And we can tell how restful it is. I mean, we can just keep going up and up and up. And that data is very useful to people. They're often very surprised by the numbers that they get. After 1 year, we'll be able to tell you whether or not it's normal for this population. Okay, we'll be able to tell you what the normal is. We also have this thing that we're doing that's pretty neat that allows people to. So one of the big things is falls. We want to minimize falls in people. And so we can do tests that tell people are at risk cognitively for falls. And we can do walking tests that tell people whether or not their gait is putting them at risk. We combine them. So the idea is that we have you walk across a mat and we measure the steps and the speed and the placement of the steps and all these things. It's a very scientific thing. Then what we do is we ask you to do something while doing that. Give you a task. And that change. So it's really cool. It's a really powerful predictor of, we think, not only for falls, but it's going to be one of those tests that allows you to separate out normal aging from those earliest progressions to development of dementia. And so all of that requires, it's not going to happen from just Jeff walking across the mat. We need lots of people. And so it's a good thing, and it's all free. And if you want to learn more about it, you can here at the thing. But do know, I've given enough of these dang things, that we have at least 2 studies. We have a normal aging study, okay, and we have a study for people with dementia. And so we're taking people into both of those things. And if you want to learn more, we have a booth down on the front, on the floor by the food. And you can sign up and learn more, or you can look at any of this. We can get in touch with you anyway, and all of it's free. So let me join in now real quick so I can get a number 5 on the thing. So, if I develop, so the questions that you get are, if I have one moment, we'll take questions here. If my mother or father had Alzheimer's disease, my aunt had Alzheimer's disease, that means I'm going to develop the disease. So the answer is that if the person who developed the disease occurred at 65 degrees, long day. If it occurred at 65 years of age or younger, that's whenever the flag starts to come up. So genetic forms of the disease, generally we say in our field, we say 5 to 8% of cases are genetic. And so that means they're inherited forms of the disease. Those people generally get the disease in their 50s, early 60s. It's a much more rapidly progressing form of the disease. So those people that get the disease after that, we say there's not likely to be an inherited risk. But what I'm telling you is that things like diabetes, things like hypertension, all of these are factors that contribute to the development of Alzheimer's disease. These are also inherited. There are inherited forms of them. And so there are families here in Louisiana, we have many of them in our studies, that are severely affected, families where all the siblings developed Alzheimer's disease. And so we get that next generation. And so what we find is that, while these families have been studied primarily looking for genes that regulate plaques and tangles, we're finding that there is a dramatic overrepresentation of hypertension, diabetes, etc. in these families. So this whole link between, what happens in your skull doesn't happen in isolation. It's influenced by your body. Okay. The other question that we get about, should I do crossword puzzles, Sudoku, and all that sort of thing? Ping pong. Okay. So that's a new one. So here's what I say to that. So first off, remember earlier I was talking about for your ability to do anything, there are multiple layers at which your brain, there are multiple parts to this process and multiple parts to dementia. The underlying fundamental one is attention. If you do not have attention, it doesn't matter how well you are with linguistics. It doesn't matter how good a planner you are. It doesn't matter what resources the rest of your brain has. If you don't have basic attention, it's over. And unfortunately, with aging, attention wanes. So the idea is anything we can do to increase attention is good. So things like prayer, things like meditation, things like Sudoku, things like crosswords, all these things are things that improve ping pong. Things that improve, anything that improves your underlying attention is going to have beneficial effects towards your cognitive health. And then diet. So I'm going to get all kinds of questions about what should you eat, what should you not eat. So the examples that I give to people are that I'm trying to put together about 8 to 10 articles because it is so individual. So for example, I can't tell you what to eat. I don't know if you're diabetic or not. So if you're diabetic, that all bets are off. I can't give you the same as someone that's non-diabetic. Second of all, lactose intolerant, etc. All these types of things that play an obvious role. Third thing is your medications. So you can take things like, for example, should you eat a lot of spinach and iron-rich foods? If you're an anemic or just a healthy individual, yeah, you should be taking a lot of those things. If you're at increased cardiovascular risk or taking medications for your heart, high iron, high calcium, these are things that can influence the effects of those medications. So it is not as simple. Don't ever believe it's as simple as you should do this, you shouldn't do that, you should do that, whatever. It's not that simple. It's a very individual sort of thing. And at Pennington, we do a lot of research on that. An example I always give is salt. So for example, instead of just hypertension, let's just take salt response. So in this room, there are people that are high responders and people that are medium and people that are low. There are people in this room that can eat a small amount of salt and have a spike in blood pressure that's not dangerous, but it's extremely high spike in blood pressure. There are other people in this room that do not. So those people that are at increased risk for a high salt response, salt's a bigger issue than the ones that aren't, that are not high responders. Does that make sense? So that's part of what we're trying to tease apart, is to look at these things, choices in foods that people make. All of those things are very individualized, and that's where the field's going. And we're going to learn a lot about it and be able to make some good assessments on how much people should walk a day and what people should avoid and all of that sort of thing. I guess I'll stop there and open floor questions. I really appreciate your time.
How does sleep narcolepsy affect Alzheimer's?
Oh, okay, so sleep. So sleep is an amazing, amazing thing. If your circadian, your biology runs on, your temperature. Your temperature changes throughout the day. Your response to inflammation changes throughout the day. These things, for example, give you two examples. If you have the flu, okay, are you functioning better in the morning? If you were going to take a test that was going to dictate whether or not you got $1 million, and unfortunately you developed flu and you couldn't take the test any other day, you still had to take it that day. And I said, I'll give you two choices. You can take it in the morning or you can take it in the afternoon. When would you take it? Morning, right? And it's because all of us have this circadian biology where your inflammatory processes kick in noonish and they drive till you go to bed. And that's all circadian biology. This is going to be a very important thing that dictates things like the sundowning and wandering and all of that. The circadian biology. Dr. Keller did not say flu caused Alzheimer's disease. People do that. People mix and match these things. But what I am saying is that peripheral inflammation does play a role in this, and it's linked to circadian biology. Your sleep is of course regulating this circadian biology. So irregular sleep, insufficient sleep, those that clock off. But it's more than that. So one of the biggest predictors for obesity is poor sleep. So poor sleep affects food choices. Okay? So it's an amazing thing. People are really starting to look at, and this isn't sleep due to stress. So those studies are done too. People with high stress also have this complication of change in sleep patterns. And so is it the stress? Is it the sleep? People are dissecting all that out. I'm talking about non-stress, just changing people's sleeping patterns, significant effects on health. So most of the studies are done beneficial, of course. You take people with poor sleeping patterns. They call it sleep hygiene. I like that. So they clean up your... there are many different things you can do to improve your quality of sleep and the duration of sleep, etc. It'll be the next phase. Right now we're capturing what the sleeping looks like in our population and how it relates to that change. And then that will dictate what happens next. Yep. Oh. Yeah. Oh, narcolepsy is a whole... That's a... narcolepsy and then the your apneas and all of these things are, I mean, they're major risk factors. Here's what I would say too, is that you got to think about your trajectory. So whether or not you're going to develop Alzheimer's disease started before you were born. So it starts with the genes. And so one of my friends goes around giving talks, and he always starts with, how do you prevent Alzheimer's disease? And then first slide is pick your parents wisely. So the idea is that you have that profile. Then you have all of the other things that modulate that. So the amount of stimulation that you get from your environment dictates. The amount of physical activity that you have dictates. And diet is one of those factors. Diet is one of those things that kind of modulates that that trajectory. You don't develop Alzheimer's disease because you didn't eat spinach, and you're not going to prevent Alzheimer's disease because you eat spinach. But that trajectory is altered by your diet and is very important, but it's very personalized type of thing. Yes, ma'am.
What is the difference between mental decline
Okay,
and
that's a good one.
Alzheimer's?
Okay.
Age and mental decline.
Okay. Well, Alzheimer's disease, of course, has to be significant enough to affect all the dementias. The clinical dementias that we're talking about are things that are significant enough to affect work and social function, performance. And so, so you can have decline that doesn't affect either of those things. And so it's kind of a judgment call on when a decline is not a leading to a dementia. When is it just normal for age is one thing. But what we're able to do, because we have a baseline, we're able to say, you know, so if you're 69 years of age and we give you, for example, a test that measures your ability to do multitasking, there's a range with what's considered normal for that age. You may have had a significant decline. So you may have declined 30% in your ability to do that test, but you're still within a normal range. Okay? If you do that on one test, that's one thing. If you do that on two or more, that's another. And we know from my friends that run these studies all around the country that those people that have significant decline on more than one test are, while still within normal range, are at much higher risk to the development of dementia. There's this thing called mild cognitive impairment. So, and this stuff gets in the news and all. Mild cognitive impairment dramatically, people with mild cognitive impairment have a significantly higher level of risk for Alzheimer's disease. But it's a very specific thing. So it's amnestic MCI. That means they have a problem primarily with those tests involving memory. Their language skills are fine, okay? Their executive function's fine, but it's those problems with memory, so amnestic. Those are the ones that increase risk, okay? And so, yeah. So does that help answer your question?
Sort of. I was trying to see, like, senile dementia, let's say, for 90, versus having the symptoms of what I hear Alzheimer's has. Is there a difference? Is that the same thing?
So there's a normal age-related decline that happens, okay? And senile dementia is most often referred to as what they call if it's dementia, it's enough to affect your social as well as work environment, and it's not considered normal for age.
Okay.
So, but here's what you need to know too: is Alzheimer's disease inevitable? That's the one I always get. So 1 in 7 over 80 in Louisiana, these numbers are going to be much higher, but 1 in 7 over 65, 1 in 2 over 85 have Alzheimer's disease. 1 in 2. So those numbers never go to 100%. So we were lucky in Kentucky to have centenarians in our study. We still don't have one here yet, but we're close. So the idea is that in those people that we had about 14 that were over the age of 100, and what you find from those people is, one is that if you're going to live to be 100, you live to be 100 in spite of yourself. They're very hedonistic people. For example, most of them still smoke. So the thing you got to know is that in those people that live to be 100, there are still 25%, 30% that do not have Alzheimer's disease or dementia. That does not, Dr. Keller did not say there are people over 100 in Kentucky who have the brain of a 20-year-old. They're declined, okay, but it's not dementia. That gets at your issue. Those that developed Alzheimer's disease who lived to be 100 years of age didn't develop it till after 90, most of them. So all bets are off, after 90 years of age. So anyway. Yes, ma'am. So there's Aricept, Exelon, and Namenda. So Namenda is the drug that's used. It's an excitotoxin inhibitor, so it prevents this amino acid called glutamate from neurotransmitter called glutamate from signaling, exciting the neurons to death. They basically have Mardi Gras every day, and they just can't take it, and they die, literally. So then you have these other drugs called Exelon and Aricept. Exelon and Aricept work by keeping the levels of this other neurotransmitter called acetylcholine high. That came about because of work at the University of Kentucky that showed that in well-characterized people with controlled mild Alzheimer's disease, late-stage Alzheimer's disease, the one thing that you could count on is this decrease in this level of this neurotransmitter called acetylcholine. If people hadn't participated in research, we wouldn't have the drugs that we have currently today. So the idea is that if you give drugs which prevent the neurons from becoming overexcited, that you can delay the disease, you can improve the retention of cognitive performance over time. Same thing with increasing the levels of acetylcholine. The problem is that why that doesn't work, we don't know for most people. But the idea is it probably has to do with a couple of things, not the least of which is it's just too blunt of an instrument. So, yes, ma'am. Why is it higher in Louisiana? Well, we think that it's going to be an overrepresentation. We think it's going to be due in significant part to the complications dealing with obesity. Dr. Keller did not say obesity causes Alzheimer's, but Dr. Keller said it's a dramatic increase in risk. So all those things that flow from that, so the hypertension, the atherosclerosis, things that lead to vascular problems contribute to the development of dementia. No question about it. Yeah.
My mother-in-law has vascular dementia. She's just been diagnosed that she's in the last stage. She's 63.
Yeah.
And,
wow.
They say she's in the last stage, but she's still eating and swallowing and bathing. Is it possible to still be doing that and in the last stage?
No. No. Yeah. So there's many different types of memory tests, and they can be more elaborate than others. But the idea is that if someone is in the late stages of Alzheimer's disease, when we refer to late stage, that includes not only their cognitive function, but it also includes their capacity. So late stage Alzheimer's disease patients are not are moderate stage Alzheimer's disease requires that people. Well, one of the parts of the definition is that they require help with activities of daily living. So by a little bit after moderate stage, they're needing help with toileting, etc. So it's just it's a semantic thing that you wouldn't ever want to use late stage Alzheimer's disease in someone that is not completely bedridden. No, because that's the other thing is right now. So part of this is accurately determining whether or not someone has Alzheimer's disease is a very important thing for research. No question about it, because we're not going to be able to get to where we need to go without having that. Clinically, because we only have 3 medications and they only work in 25% of the people and they only help for 9 months, it's still not as pressing of an issue with those people. Because what's the alternative? Right now, I can't, if they have late-stage Alzheimer's disease, if they're more at a mild to moderate instead of late-stage and it's a semantic thing, it still doesn't change what drugs are available to them. It still doesn't change anything with regards to that. So with the physician, it's not as pressing of a matter. It's just not. What the physician is going to do is going to be to give them the drugs that are available, keep them on them if they don't have, if the adverse events, if the nausea, etc., isn't too much for them, see if they get some benefit from that, help in guiding their other medications, and then ride them through. There are no treatments. So it's not the issue of moderate to severe is not as pressing of a matter to clarify with your physician. Well, I got those. I was trying to get. Yeah, methylene blue. So there are a lot of trials out there, and we're going to be doing them here. The one that we're going to get first is actually clinical trials are very important to do, even if they fail. So I'm a big proponent for doing trials, but I'm very excited that the first one that looks like we're going to get is actually something that works on it's a systemic thing. It's working on the inflammatory processes of the body, and so anyway, it looks very promising. The methylene blue that you're discussing there, one of the problems with that is that it's very good. It's already, a lot of people go through and they look for things that are FDA approved for other diseases because it speeds the ability to do these things in Alzheimer's disease studies. One of the big problems is that whether or not methylene blue helps in people with moderate stage disease is a different question than if it would help in those 11% of people that have increased risk for development of Alzheimer's disease. So if that study fails, it's like, what about vitamin E, CoQ, and all these other things? Do they protect or do they not? Well, a lot of people argue that you're giving these things to people at moderate stage disease to see if you can reverse the disease, and that's a completely different thing than if you give it to them whenever they're starting to have cognitive abnormalities before dementia. And so, so the answer is, I don't know if methylene blue, I don't know if it's going to work. I know that it would probably work better if you gave it to people earlier in the disease. But one of the problems is that FDA approves drugs for diseases. Mild cognitive impairment is not a disease. So one of the problems is, and it's starting to be, they're starting to work on this, it's starting to change, is that you're starting to see trials that happen earlier and earlier. So you'll be able to give drugs to people who are at increased risk for developing of the disease and see if it alters that. But those are more expensive studies to do, and they take longer and everything. But my guess is that once you see that approved, that where people can start doing clinical trials with mild cognitive impairment, you're going to see a whole host of trials happen, and there we might have a chance of things like methylene blue. I hope it works, but I have my concerns in that it's being done and maybe too late. Let me grab. Yeah, ma'am. Well, we were supposed to start 6 months ago, and it's all when the budget cuts happened. That's when our plans changed, and so we're raising money to do it, and we should be up and going there in the next month, I would think. Yeah, we're going to be we're going to be at the School of Allied Health with LSUA. Oh, we're going. We're in year 3. You call any one of these numbers or go to the booth on the first floor, and they'll sign you up or give you all the information. This is the same one, ma'am. No, ma'am. You have to be age 60 and over unless you have a strong family history. If you have a strong family history, and we can go over that on the phone. If you have a strong family history, then we take people that are younger. So, like for example, the bourgeois family and other ones, we went all the way down into the 40s. We got that whole next generation. So, this study here is the. No, ma'am, it's never full. No. Okay, no, it's never full. And if you just call one of these numbers or see Leslie downstairs, yes, ma'am, make sure. It's always ongoing. It's amazing. No matter how many times I do it, people still ask questions. Yeah. There are 2 studies, people with active dementia, people that do not have dementia. They are both constantly enrolling. They are both accessible and free by calling either this number or this email or seeing the front desk down there. Yeah. It's amazing. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, so you can... so what we do is, right now what we do is, we're not a for-care facility. It's actually a very powerful thing. So in Kentucky, what happened is that, you know, all the people in Kentucky who have concern that they might have Alzheimer's disease, whether it be the physician, the family, or that individual, they go to the University of Kentucky. They get the best workup possible. They get access to the latest in clinical trials. That family is then guided to the respite opportunities that are out there, the support groups that are out there. It's all, nothing falls through the cracks. It's all nice and neat. So hold on, I'm going to answer your question. So the idea is that we're doing the same thing here, but because one of the problems at Kentucky is that when that physician referred that person to the University of Kentucky, they knew they lost somebody because there'd be self-referrals in the UK system. So here, the beautiful thing is that we have a nice partnership with all of the physicians in town. Most of them are on my work with us on our external advisory board, and the idea is that we partner with them. I'm on the board of directors for the Alzheimer's services. I do a lot of work with the respite opportunities. So the idea is we're trying to build that network so it doesn't have to be word of mouth and nothing falls through the crack. That being said, what happens whenever someone in our study has this significant decline that we would not consider normal for age? Well, what we do is that we then make a recommendation that you go see your physician. Okay? And if you do not have a physician, we can make some recommendation of people that we know are up to date on the latest in research and such. We do not refer to any particular physician. We do not, all I can do is provide a list of people that would be of interest. But we do not, we're not a for-care facility. And it's actually a very, very good thing that we're not. I had no idea how big of a problem that was in Kentucky until I moved down here. Because if we start offering care for people, we start managing people, then we become a direct competition with all these physicians, and it just throws the whole thing off. Yeah.
Are there any signs that occur in the 40s or 50s?
Yeah. Yeah. So you may have heard of something called the Nun study that was also done at the University of Kentucky. See, I got to keep plugging it. The University of, and what we found there is that the sisters were required to, first back up, it's kind of funny that the human competition is an amazing thing. So the sisters, we got the sisters enrolled into the study for brain donation and all. And the first thing that happened after that we didn't even realize was then the priest wanted to get involved because they didn't want to be outdone by the sisters, so the priest got involved. So anyway, so the idea is that in the Nun study what we found is that the change in language, particularly writing, in individuals in their 30s and 40s predicted whether or not they would go on to develop dementia. Okay? Because all of the sisters were required to keep a detailed journal. So sisters are the best to study because they eat the same thing, they live the same place, they do, they're as close to mice as we can get. I mean, they're great control. So what we're able to, and they're dedicated. Boy, you do not, it's 100%. I mean, yeah, you don't get out of the study once you're in. I mean, the sisters, woo. So anyway, probably smack each other with rulers or something. So the idea is that, and I went to Catholic school, I can say that. So the idea is that it's that change that's important. So please don't leave here saying Dr. Keller said those that had lower linguistics developed dementia. That's not it. It's the delta. It's the change, and that's why baselines are so important. So what we're able to do is you're able to look at the complexity of language use in these people in their 20s and 30s, maybe in 20s and 30s, and then you compare it to in their 40s, and it was that delta that predicted whether or not someone developed dementia. So if someone was low, if someone had lower education and language use, that did not mean they were at increased risk. It was the amount of difference that they had. And language is it's an amazing thing to with normal aging, there's error. So your ability to retrieve words, the speed with which you retrieve words, and then your battery of words. So you may forget a word. Like I may show you something and you may not know the word doesn't come to mind, but you know everything about it. You can get context. You can give all this context. That tells us something. It's the richness with which of the association that you have with that word. So, for example, if you don't know the word, you don't know the context, and I knew you knew that word when you were 20, that tells us something. If you know the word, if you can't think of the word, but you know everything about it, like Ronald Reagan, I show a Ronald Reagan thing, and his governor of California, he was president, he was a movie star, he was but you can't come up with a name, okay? That tells us something. If then I didn't say R and you prompted, you say Ronald Reagan, okay? That tells us something. So all of these things are clues as to how the brain is working or not working, unfortunately. And so, yeah, it wasn't that surprising to us that language was a predictor, but it's it's nice that we need to have better ways of quantifying that. Yeah. So I'll let y'all can run. I'm gonna stick around. I hope that you'll tell people about our study and that you enjoy your visit at Pennington today. Okay. Yeah, absolutely.